Hi, Attorney Sorrell. It's Chad Clark. I'm going to try to make this a little briefer than my last presentation, but I can't promise anything. I put this together and it's a little longer than I thought it was going to be, but I'm just going to go over the role of the defense, the moral issues that come up when with certain clients or during cases that the defense attorney has to deal with, and then I'm going to go over my movie clip that I picked out and the real and unreal situations that kind of took place in that movie. But the textbook starts off by saying that the defense is really there to navigate the rough waters for their client or the defendant through the justice system, which can be really daunting, even for seasoned police officers like I was. It's, sometimes things come up that you've never had to deal with before, but so the defendant's hoping that the attorney's competent, and they shouldn't, if they are hiring an attorney, they shouldn't be going looking for an attorney who works on real estate to represent them in a murder case, and the attorney should be saying, yeah, that's not really my forte. It's, I'm going to have to recommend somebody else for that case. But when they do find a competent attorney, it should be somebody that thoroughly investigates the case for them, can call maybe some expert witnesses for them. And my father always said, proper preparation prevents piss poor performance. I'm sorry. And it is true for defense attorneys when they're preparing a case, especially when it's could mean the rest of somebody's life. They also need to be effective communicators where, they can't be ghosting the client when their client's wondering, they could have 7.5 to 15 years hanging over their head, and then the attorney's not, they're out on a fishing trip and they haven't heard from them in a week. So they really need to keep them in the loop of what's going on, and what the negotiations, if they're in a plea negotiating circumstance, they need to keep contact. And having worked in a jail, I know that those defendants were really wondering sometimes, like, I haven't heard from my attorney in a month, and I don't know what's going on with my case. So that's a big part of being a defense attorney also. The attorney has to be zealous about the case, not necessarily overzealous, but my example is OJ's attorneys, where they say, if it doesn't fit, you must have quit. I mean, that was I think towards the end of the trial, where they were still zealous about their case, and they were trying to get OJ off from the murders of his ex-wife and Ron Goldman, and I know he's paying him a lot of money, but that should be even a public defender. And I think our textbook talks about that. There's not a lot of difference between hiring an attorney and a public defender, as far as what the guilty or not guilty verdicts were. And if it doesn't go to trial and the defense attorney says, well, the best way for us to handle this and deal with this is maybe a plea agreement where they say, okay, well, instead of doing 15 years in prison, I can get you 7 years in prison. My example, if you're John Wayne Gacy, you have 26 bodies in your crawl space, and the police have all this evidence against you. Well, let's see what the best deal we can get, so you're not going to do the rest of your life in prison or the death penalty. Sometimes that's the best scenario that you're going to get as a defendant. As far as the ethical or moral side of being an attorney would be, you're always presuming that your client's innocent until they're proven guilty. That's the number one rule for being an attorney, even if you're a prosecutor. So you want to be a client-centered representation, where I had a guy, and he represented himself one time, and he said, the judge said, why are you representing yourself? He said, Your Honor, you don't want to know what I think of attorneys. So the judge said, no, I don't want to know what I think of attorneys, what you think of attorneys. So you want to advocate for protecting their rights and have the best case possible for your client. Unless there's a few circumstances where you wouldn't, be in that situation, because the attorney has the duty to prevent, if the client tells them that they're going to go kill a witness or kill, the victim, or there's bodily harm involved, they're going to break both their legs, and the attorney has the duty to go and say something to the police, and give them that information, or property crime or financial crime. Some other ethical obligations with some challenging cases would be defending unpopular clients, where John Adams in the Boston Massacre, he represented actually the British soldiers, and actually I was going to pick that clip from John Adams, the miniseries, but he represented the British soldiers in their trial in the Boston Massacre, and they were acquitted of the charges of murder. So even though they weren't a popular group at the time, right before the American Revolution, that was something that had to be done, and John Adams knew that they had the right to a defense. And dealing with potentially guilty clients, whereas I said O.J. Simpson, he was and still is the only suspect in the case of the murder of his ex-wife and Ron Goldman, and he ran from the police. He had motive. All the evidence pointed to that he was guilty. So the attorney kind of has to deal with, well, I might think he's guilty, but he still has the right to representation and a zealous defense. Okay, now the movie that I picked was It's A Few Good Men, where he says it. I want the truth. And Jack Nicholson says, you can't handle the truth. So I'm sure you remember that, but a lot of the kids in our class probably either picked it, but they never saw it in the theater like I did. But it was about a few JAG officers. Tom Cruise was one, Demi Moore was another. And they were defending two Marines that were charged with the beating of another Marine, and it was actually ordered by their commanding officer in the movie. And the defense attorney Tom Cruise played, Caffey, he was known to do a lot of plea bargaining with his clients, and Demi Moore's Galloway character wanted to go to trial because she knew that the commanding officer, who was played by Jack Nicholson, commanded the beating of the other officer. And what they did was, in the realistic, the other soldier or Marine, what they did when the realistic parts was when Caffey meets with his clients, he interviewed witnesses, he presented evidence, he prepared a fact-driven case, and he goes to trial with it. And there's a part in the trial where there's an objection brought by the prosecutors, played by Kevin Bacon, and it's overruled by the judge where the objection is noted. So that was some realistic parts of it, and the witnesses. Some witnesses weren't on the witness list, and then they were objected to, but it was overruled by the judge because Demi Moore says that they were rebuttal witnesses, which I kind of knew what they were, but I had never dealt with that. So I looked them up, and they were called to dispute testimony given under direct questioning. So she brought that up in court to the judge and said this is why they're allowed in court. There were some unrealistic parts where Colonel Jessup walks off the witness stand and says, "I'm done," with this questioning. And this is kind of a military court, so it was even more unbelievable than a witness getting up in a civilian court and just walking off the stand. But and the judge never really says anything to him. The defense attorney, Tom Cruise, says, get back up on the stand. And then, so he gets back on the stand. And then at the end, the judge holds Tom Cruise, the defense attorney, in contempt of court, but he allows him to continue questioning the witness, which was odd too. He was either in contempt or he wasn't. Why would he let him continue to question when when he was in contempt of court. So I didn't understand that whole part, which seemed really unrealistic to me. But an interesting part was when Caffey brought witnesses in who could not testify to the evidence. He was saying that they could testify to. So I dealt with this as a police officer. You can tell the suspect, in this case, they were telling the prosecutor that they had witnesses that were going to testify to something they really didn't. They used that. And I actually read in some of the comments on the YouTube clip, it said, one of them said, a good lawyer baits you with questions knowing the answer will bury you later on, which was actually very well said. It's almost like a lawyer wrote it. But so I thought that was a really good comment on what a defense attorney can do. And then we did it in police work also. You know, you could bring in a paper bag that you said was filled with evidence and there was nothing in it. The Supreme Court's actually ruled that that's admissible. So just to sum that up, some of it was realistic, some of it wasn't. But overall, I'd say it portrayed the court system and a defense attorney pretty well. In the end, he ended up, you know, he was zealous in his representation of his clients. He interviewed witnesses. He got a bunch of evidence. He knew that one of the witnesses was actually guilty of a crime. So in the end, he got him arrested in I think it was Article 32, which was a court-martial hearing in military court. So it was overall it was a good fair representation of what I'd say what the defense attorney and the justice system kind of looks like. As an aside, you asked about the historical context. I said I had watched the John Adams miniseries, and when he was a defense attorney in Boston, he was. I didn't realize, and I don't know if it was true. I haven't heard anything to the contrary, but it was pretty interesting to watch him question a witness who was actually in the gallery, and there were people yelling and, you know, swearing, and, you know, it was total chaos. And then the jury's sitting up there and the judge is sitting up there and nobody's saying anything, and everybody's kind of going crazy. So I thought that was really interesting as far as the historical court process went, and I think they tried to keep that show pretty close to how, you know, the actual events. So I thought that was interesting that it was kind of chaos in the courtroom back in the 1700s. So just an aside for the historical fact of a trial back in the day. So thanks for listening, and I only went 13 minutes, so hopefully that wasn't too long for you. All right, thanks. Have a good night. Bye.